I'm finally reading Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, one of the great modern American novels. I don't know why I put it off for so long, but I'm glad I'm reading it now because it is brilliant. I'm about halfway through, and I am learning so much about writing just by reading it. And I could do a whole long video about the lessons, but today I just want to talk to you about the opening, how Morrison pulls us into the story and gets us reading. Like, this book caught my attention right away. It's not my normal kind of book. Of course, I read a wide variety of things, but oftentimes I'm looking for more action-oriented books. That's usually my taste, but this book manages to still keep me enthralled without all of that. Partly because of the language, partly because of the imagery. But what drew me in the first place is the way she introduces the whole novel. So right at the start, right after The Bluest Eye, we have 2 pages of text basically from old school Dick and Jane books, the books that I grew up with back in the early 80s, and other people before me might have been reading all the way back to the turn of the 20th century. Here is the house. It is green and white. It has a red door. It is very pretty. Here is the family. Mother, father, Dick, and Jane live in the green and white house. And so on. And it builds up the same kind of language over and over and over again, getting more and more frantic with it, cutting out more and more punctuation until at the end, it's all one long paragraph of the same thing over and over and over again. This text itself and the emotional qualities of speeding it up this way, of cutting out the punctuation, eventually cutting out the spaces and running it all together, adds this notion of franticness, this emotional intensity to it that is going to be seriously reflected later on in the novel. This is part of one of the thematic ideas that's going to be built up throughout this book. As far as I can tell, I'm halfway through. I already know most of the plot beats, so I can tell you that this is a very interesting way to start a novel, but that's not really what caught my attention. It was enough to get me reading the next page, and then we have these 2 pages in italics, and this is what really drew me in. Quiet as it's kept, there were no marigolds in the fall of 1941. We thought at the time that it was because Peccola was having her father's baby that the marigolds did not grow. A little examination and much less melancholy would have proved to us that our seeds were not the only ones that did not sprout. Nobody's did. Not even the gardens fronting the lake showed marigolds that year. But so deeply concerned were we with the health and safe delivery of Peccola's baby, we could think of nothing but our own magic. If we planted the seeds and said the right words over them, they would blossom and everything would be all right. It was a long time before my sister and I admitted to ourselves that no green was going to spring from our seeds. Once we knew, our guilt was relieved only by fights and mutual accusations about who was to blame. For years I thought my sister was right. It was my fault. I had planted them too far down in the earth. It never occurred to either of us that the earth itself might have been unyielding. We had dropped our seeds in our own little plot of black dirt, just as Peccola's father had dropped his seeds in his own plot of black dirt. Our innocence and faith were no more productive than his lust or despair. What is clear now is that all of that hope, fear, lust, love, and grief, nothing remains but Peccola and the unyielding earth. Charlie Brelove is dead, our innocence too. The seeds shriveled and died. Her baby, too. There is really nothing more to say, except why. But since why is difficult to handle, one must take refuge in how. Very dark opening, but do we see what it does there? It sets up the whole book. It basically, in a very, very short page and a half, summarizes the plot for us. This draws me in because now that I know about these intense things that are happening, dark as they are, I feel compelled and invested to find out how it all comes about and what kind of meaning we can draw from it. How can we determine the why out of the how? It's a great setup. Toni Morrison did not invent this setup, of course. She's drawing on an old tradition. This is the way classic plays used to be introduced. Classic drama, classic epics, oftentimes would be introduced by a chorus who would give a monologue that essentially told you what was going to happen in the play. Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet starts off just like this. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage. The which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. That's a sonnet, a 14-line poem with a specific line structure and iambic pentameter that basically tells us the entire story of Romeo and Juliet. It spoils the whole thing for us. And yet, I don't know of anyone who didn't continue reading after reading that opening. Anyone who understood that opening, because it's compelling. It draws us in. What happened? How did this come about? What can we say about it? I'm not saying this is the only way to start a drama or a novel, but is it an effective way? Absolutely. You don't want to reveal everything, but reveal enough, both plot-wise and thematically, to give the reader something to look forward to give the reader a sense of expectation. You're foreshadowing things more blatantly than you often want to do in, say, a mystery or something where you might want to leave a lot unknown, but you're foreshadowing things in a way that doesn't eliminate the reader's curiosity or alleviate it in any way. It actually inspires it. It draws it out. So it's got to do something thematically. It's got to give some meaning, some kind of purpose behind it. We know when we read the opening lines to The Bluest Eye that there's a purpose for this story. There's a meaning behind it. There's a reason for us to invest ourselves in it and spend some hours with these characters, find out how this happened and what lessons we can learn from it and how can it affect us emotionally and spiritually in our lives. It's the same thing with the Romeo and Juliet thing. It draws us in and makes us want to find out what happens next. I am going to see if I can just take a look at some of my other writing projects and if I might craft an introduction like this that can draw my readers in without spoiling too much, but revealing specific plot points and specific thematic ideas, dark or light, however it happens to be, that evoke the reader's curiosity, that make the reader have to pay attention and say, holy crap, this is important. I need to read further. I hope this helped you out, guys. If you have not read The Bluest Eye yet, I highly recommend that you go and do it. Let me know your thoughts on it down below. What other novels should I cover? Should I talk about from a writer's perspective here? Please comment that down below as well. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And click the join button if you like to become a member. I would really appreciate it. Our membership's growing, and I am trying to build more and more value there. So, until next time, good luck, good reading, and good writing. Peace.